It was a cold night, the kind that chills your bones and humbles your pride. The rain poured down in sheets, and most of the city was asleep. Darius was just about to close up shop when he heard the sputtering sound of a car struggling against the storm. Headlights cut through the rain as a black SUV rolled to a stop right outside his station. Steam hissed from under the hood. The driver stepped out tall, well-dressed, angry at the world. His suit screamed wealth, but his face showed frustration. "Hey, you open?" the man asked, voice sharp and impatient. Darius nodded, wiping his hands on an old rag. "Yeah, what's wrong?" The man sighed. "I don't know. The car just died on me. Figures. Expensive piece of junk." Without hesitation, Darius grabbed his flashlight and got to work. He didn't care about the man's tone. He just wanted to help. His fingers were trembling from the cold, but he stayed focused, tracing wires and tightening bolts until the engine coughed back to life. "Try it now," Darius said quietly. The engine roared perfectly. The man looked surprised. "What did you do?" Darius smiled faintly. "Loose battery terminal. You're good to go." The man reached into his wallet, pulled out a $100 bill, and held it out. "Take it." Darius shook his head. "It's okay, sir. You don't owe me anything." The man frowned. "Everyone wants something." Darius looked at him and said, "Not everyone." For a brief moment, silence filled the air, just the rain and the hum of the engine. The man stared at Darius, speechless. He slipped the money back into his pocket, nodded awkwardly, and drove off into the storm. Darius watched the taillights fade. To him, it was just another night. But to the man he helped, it was a moment he wouldn't forget. Days passed. Life went on. Darius still worked long hours, still struggled to make rent. Until one morning, he got a call from a friend who worked downtown. There was an opening, a maintenance position at a large corporate firm. The pay was good. The chance was rare. Darius ironed his only clean shirt, borrowed a pair of shoes from his neighbor, and took the bus across the city. He arrived nervous but hopeful. The receptionist smiled kindly and told him to wait for the hiring manager. When the office door opened, Darius froze. The manager who walked in was the same man from that rainy night, the man whose car he had fixed for free. The man blinked in surprise. "You," he said softly, "you're the mechanic." Darius nodded. "Yes, sir. Didn't expect to see you again." The man smiled, this time with humility. "Neither did I." He gestured to the seat. "Please, sit." They spoke for 20 minutes. About life, about work, about honesty. The man's name was Jonathan Hale, CEO of Hale Industries. And in that conversation, he saw something in Darius no resume could ever show: integrity. "You start Monday," Jonathan said. Darius almost couldn't breathe. "Thank you, sir. I won't let you down." And he didn't. Weeks turned into months, and Darius became the company's hardest worker. He arrived early, stayed late, and never asked for more than what he earned. People began to notice his quiet determination. Everyone except Rick, a senior supervisor who saw Darius's rise as a threat. Rick started whispering in corners, planting seeds of doubt, twisting every mistake into a scandal. Soon, those whispers reached Jonathan's ears. One afternoon, Jonathan called Darius into his office. His tone was cold this time. "Darius, I trusted you. But lately, I've been hearing things. Missing files, budget errors, people saying you've been careless." Darius's chest tightened. "Sir, that's not true. You know I'd never..." Jonathan cut him off. "I can't take chances. You'll get your final check on Friday." And just like that, everything Darius worked for was gone. He left the building that day with his head down, his heart broken, and not a single person stood up for him. That night, it rained again, the same cold, merciless rain as the night he'd helped that stranger. Only this time, he was the one feeling stranded in life. But fate has a strange way of circling back. Later that week, Jonathan was driving home on the outskirts of town. His phone rang, distracting him just long enough for his car to hit a pothole and stall. The rain began to fall hard again. He stepped out, cursing under his breath. and opened the hood. That's when a tow truck pulled over. The headlights cut through the rain, and the driver stepped out. It was Darius. Jonathan froze. The same man he had just fired now stood before him, offering help once again. "Car trouble?" Darius asked quietly. Jonathan hesitated. "Yeah, looks like it." Darius didn't say anything more. He just walked over, grabbed his tools, and started working, rain dripping down his face. Same calm expression as before. A few minutes later, the car roared back to life. Jonathan's voice cracked when he spoke. "You helped me again. After everything I did?" Darius smiled faintly. "Some lessons don't need anger to be taught." Jonathan looked down in shame. For the first time, he saw how small his pride was compared to Darius's character. He reached for his wallet again, but Darius stopped him. "Keep it. I didn't do this for money then, and I'm not doing it for it now." The next morning, Jonathan ordered a full audit of his company. And the truth came out. Rick had been forging reports, deleting files, and framing Darius all along. Rick was fired on the spot. Jonathan didn't waste another moment. He drove straight to Darius's small garage, where he found him repairing an old truck. "Darius," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology, and more than that, a chance to make things right." Darius stood up, wiping his hands, unsure what to say. Jonathan continued, "You taught me more in one night of rain than I've learned in 20 years of business. I want you back. Not as an employee, as a partner." Tears filled Darius's eyes. He had spent his life helping others for nothing, and finally, someone saw him. The poor man who once helped a stranger out of kindness was now being lifted out of poverty by that same act of compassion. But just when it seemed justice had finally been served, Jonathan's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. His face went pale. He turned away, voice trembling. "Darius, there's something I need to tell you. Something about your past and mine. They say when life starts blessing you, it also starts testing you." Just when Darius thought his story had turned around, fate whispered, "Not yet." After Jonathan offered him partnership in the company, Darius felt like everything had finally fallen into place. For the first time in years, he wasn't worrying about rent, or food, or if tomorrow would be worse than today. He was grateful, and he promised himself never to let success change the man he was inside. But that peace didn't last long. One afternoon, as Darius was helping the team at a company event, he noticed Jonathan standing near the balcony, pale, distant, holding his phone like he'd just seen a ghost. Darius walked over, concern on his face. "Everything all right, sir?" he asked. Jonathan hesitated. His eyes said more than his lips could. "Darius, we need to talk." The tone in his voice was heavy, the kind that makes your stomach twist before you even know why. They went to Jonathan's office. The air felt colder than usual. Jonathan closed the blinds, sat behind his desk, and took a long breath. "Darius," he began, "before I tell you this, I need you to know I didn't plan for any of it. I swear I didn't." Darius frowned. "Didn't plan what?" Jonathan stared down at his hands. "Do you remember that night you helped me? The night in the rain?" Darius nodded slowly. Jonathan's voice trembled. "What I didn't tell you is that I wasn't just driving home from work that night. I was leaving a meeting with a man who changed my life years ago. A man who I owed everything to." Darius didn't understand. "Okay, what does that have to do with me?" Jonathan stood up and opened a drawer. Inside was an old photograph, two men shaking hands in front of an auto garage. One of them was much younger, but the other was unmistakable. It was Darius's late father. Darius froze. "That's my dad. Where did you get that picture?" Jonathan's eyes watered. "Your father saved me when I was your age. I was broke, jobless, ready to give up. He gave me work, taught me discipline, told me to build a business with honesty. But when the business took off, I made a deal with people I shouldn't have, and they forced me to cut ties with him." Darius's voice cracked. "You mean you abandoned him?" Jonathan's tears fell. "I did worse. They took over his shop. I signed the papers that shut it down. He lost everything because of me." Silence. Just silence. The sound of rain tapping the glass window. Darius couldn't breathe. His chest felt tight. The man he'd helped, the man he respected, was the reason his father died in poverty. Jonathan tried to reach for him. Darius, I swear I didn't know until recently. I looked you up after that night. When I realized who you were, I didn't know how to tell you. Darius stepped back, eyes burning. You let me work under you. You let me trust you after what you did to my family. Jonathan's voice shook. I was trying to make it right. Everything I offered, the job, the partnership. It wasn't pity, Darius. It was redemption. Darius clenched his fists. Redemption doesn't erase betrayal. The room filled with tension so heavy, you could feel it in your bones. Jonathan tried again. Please, listen. Your father's death, it wasn't just business. It was deeper than that. There's something else you don't know. Darius stared coldly. Then tell me. Jonathan looked at him, hesitant. Before your father passed, he gave me something. A document. He said it was meant for his son when the time was right. He opened his safe and pulled out a sealed brown envelope, worn by age. He placed it on the table. I've kept this for 15 years. Darius hesitated before picking it up. His hands trembled as he broke the seal and unfolded the papers. His eyes scanned the words, then widened in shock. What is this? He whispered. Jonathan lowered his head. It's the real ownership deed of Hale Industries. The room went still. Darius blinked, not understanding. You mean my father? Jonathan nodded slowly. Your father funded the first version of this company. Every dollar I used came from him, but the investors forced him out, and when I signed that deal, they gave me his shares to silence him. Darius's heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. His father was the true founder. His life's work had been stolen. And now, standing across from him, was the man who built an empire on top of that betrayal. Darius's voice dropped to a whisper. You built your success on my father's ashes. Jonathan's voice cracked. I'm trying to give it back to you. But Darius wasn't ready for forgiveness. Not yet. He grabbed the papers, looked Jonathan dead in the eyes, and said, You didn't give this to me out of guilt. You gave it to me because you're scared, and maybe you should be. Jonathan looked shocked. Darius, don't do something you'll regret. Darius turned toward the door. You already did. He walked out, leaving Jonathan alone, trembling, broken, and afraid of what might come next. That night, Darius sat in his small apartment, the deed spread across the table, his father's name printed clearly beside Jonathan's. He thought about everything, the struggle, the nights without food, the humiliation, the betrayal. He had every reason to destroy Jonathan, every reason to take back what was rightfully his. But one question haunted him more than revenge ever could. Was forgiveness stronger than justice? Before he could decide, his phone buzzed. An unknown number. He answered. Hello? A distorted voice on the other end said softly, Mr. Cole, we need to talk about Jonathan Hale. He's not who you think he is, and your father's death wasn't an accident. Darius froze. Who is this? The voice chuckled darkly. Someone who's been waiting for the truth to come out. Click. The line went dead. Darius sat there, breath shaking, as thunder cracked outside. He looked down at the papers and for the first time, noticed a second folded page he hadn't opened yet. He slowly unfolded it, and what he saw inside made his blood run cold. Darius Cole sat in silence, the brown envelope still open on his table, the rain tapping gently on his window like time itself was waiting for him to move. The voice on the phone still echoed in his mind. Your father's death wasn't an accident. His fingers trembled as he unfolded the second page inside the envelope. It wasn't a document, it was a letter. Handwritten, his father's writing. He started to read, My son, if you're reading this, it means the world didn't play fair with me, but I pray it will with you. The men I trusted betrayed me. One of them was Jonathan Hale, but he's not your enemy. He's just a man who lost his way. If life ever puts him before you again, don't seek revenge, seek truth, because the truth will free you, both of you. Tears blurred Darius's vision. His chest tightened. His father had known everything. He had known what Jonathan did. And yet, he didn't want vengeance. Before Darius could process it all, his phone rang again. Same unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. "Who are you?" he demanded. The same distorted voice replied, calm and chilling. "The man who killed your father wants to meet you." Darius's heart stopped. "What did you say?" "Tonight, Pier 17, midnight. Come alone." He sat frozen for a moment. Then, with his father's letter in one hand and the deed in the other, he made his choice. Hours later, the rain returned heavy, cold, relentless. Darius arrived at Pier 17. The water was dark and restless, just like his thoughts. The city lights shimmered on the wet pavement. A figure stepped out from the shadows, tall, wearing a coat, and when he spoke, Darius instantly recognized the voice. It was Rick, the same man who framed him at Hale Industries. Darius clenched his fists. It was you?" Rick smirked. "You think Jonathan's the villain?" "No. He was a fool who thought he could outsmart people like me. Your father got in the way of a business deal 15 years ago. I made sure he disappeared. Jonathan signed papers, but I pulled the strings." Darius's voice shook. "You killed my father." Rick shrugged coldly. "Business is business. And right now, you have something that belongs to me. Those documents. You hand them over. You walk away alive." Darius's eyes burned. "You think I came here scared? I came here for the truth and now I have it." Rick pulled a gun. "Then it ends here." Lightning flashed across the water, followed by the faint sound of footsteps behind Rick. Jonathan Hale emerged from the shadows, drenched in rain, eyes filled with guilt and fury. "No, Rick. It ends now." Rick spun around, shocked. "You followed him?" Jonathan's voice trembled but firmed. "I followed my conscience," Darius shouted. "You knew?" Jonathan nodded. "I knew there was more to your father's death. I hired private investigators. When you left my office, they found Rick's name all over the forged contracts." Rick's smirk faded. "You won't live to tell anyone." A gunshot cracked through the storm, one loud, echoing sound. Rick stumbled back, clutching his shoulder, and fell to the ground. The gun clattered beside him. Jonathan stood shaking, holding his own gun smoking from the shot. Darius rushed forward. "You shot him?" Jonathan's hands trembled. "He was going to kill you. I couldn't let that happen again." Police sirens wailed in the distance. Rick groaned, blood mixing with rainwater. Jonathan turned to Darius, eyes full of pain. "Your father, he saved my life once. Tonight, I repaid that debt, but I'll spend the rest of my life atoning for what I took from him. And family ever." Darius stepped closer, his father's letter still in his pocket. "He forgave you, even before he died. He said you weren't my enemy." Jonathan's voice cracked. "Then I'll make sure his son never suffers again." As the police lights flashed across the pier, Jonathan raised his hands and turned himself in. "Tell the world the truth," he said quietly. "Tell them the good man won." Darius could only nod, tears blending with the rain. Months later, the newspapers told the story, "Corporate fraud exposed. CEO confesses. Family business rightfully returned." Darius inherited what his father built, but he didn't call it Hale Industries anymore. He renamed it Cole & Son Automotive to honor the man whose kindness never faded, even when the world was cruel. He rehired workers who'd been laid off. He opened free repair programs for struggling families. He became the kind of man his father raised him to be: humble, fair, and honest. But even as he rebuilt his life, he sometimes stood outside his new office window, staring at the rain, remembering the stranger he helped one cold night, never imagining that kindness would lead him through betrayal, truth, and redemption. Because that's what life does. It tests you when you least expect it. It hides lessons in pain, and it rewards those who act with integrity, even when no one's watching. Jonathan Hale spent 5 years behind bars. Before his sentence ended, he sent Darius one final letter. "I built my empire with pride, but I lost my soul in the process. You helped me find it again. If your father could see you now, he'd be proud." You didn't just fix engines, Darius. You fixed people. Sometimes, the people you forgive become the ghosts you face again. And sometimes, the end of one story is just the beginning of another. If you were Darius, would you forgive Jonathan? Would you keep the business or walk away from everything tied to that pain? Tell us what you would have done in the comments below. And if you believe good always finds its way back, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications because more stories like this are coming.